Okay, this lesson is going to be about absolute value equations. And before we get into the equations, let's just talk about absolute value in general. You remember that we said the absolute value is the distance a number is from zero. So, for example, the absolute value of 16 is 16 because it's 16 spaces from zero. But the absolute value of negative 16 is also 16 because that's also 16 spaces from zero. So there are two things that we can take the absolute value of and get the same answer. One's the positive and one's the negative. And that's the concept that we're going to use to solve these problems. If you'll look in your book on page 609, down at the bottom, there's a box, and it says to solve an absolute value equation, you use the positive or the negative. Now, that looks really complicated in the way that they've written it there, but it's not that bad. So turn over to page 612. There it is, page 612. And we're going to start with problem number 5. So it says the absolute value of something is 12. Well, what are the two things that I could take the absolute value of and get 12 for the answer? One is 12 and one's negative 12. Whoops, scratch that. Negative 12. So there's my two answers. 12, negative 12. I can't write today. All right, let's go to number 9. So the absolute value of something is 9. Well, what could that something be? That something could be 9, or it could be negative 9. So what I'm doing is taking what's in the absolute value symbol, making it equal to the positive of that number, and making it equal to the negative of that number. Then I just need to solve each part. In this case, I add 3. In this case, I add 3. So my two possibilities are 12 and negative 6. Now, if you check those, if you put 12 right here, 12 minus 3 is 9, and the absolute value is 9. If you put negative 6 right here, negative 6 minus 3 is negative 9, and the absolute value is still 9. So you're going to get two answers, and all you do is take what's in the absolute value symbol, make it equal to the positive and equal to the negative, and then solve each little part. So I'm moving on down to number 15. The absolute value of something is 14. So that something could be 14, or it could be negative 14. And now I just have to solve each little part. So I'm going to subtract 5 and divide by 2. Then I'm going to subtract 5 and divide by 2. That's an X right there in case you can't tell that. So my solution for this problem is 9 over 2 and negative 19 over 2. And again, if you put those back into the original equation and check them, you will get that the absolute value is positive 14. All right, next we're looking at number 23. Same scenario. Don't let the fact that it has a fraction in it confuse you. So 1/2 x plus 3 equals 2, or 1/2 x plus 3 equals negative 2. Then you just solve each part. So in this case, I subtract 3. And then I divide by 1/2. And if you type in negative 1 divided by 1/2, you'll get negative 2. In this one, I also subtract 3. but I get a negative 5. Now I do negative 5 divided by 1/2. Do it on the calculator if you need to, and you'll get negative 10. So my solution for this one is negative 2, negative 10. Now, there are two special kind of problems that I need to make you aware of. One is number 81, and that is before you do the equal to the positive, equal to the negative, you need to what we call isolate the absolute value. That means get the absolute value by itself. So this plus 1 has got to go away. That means I need to subtract it. And I do that before I do x plus 4 equals 1, x plus 4 equals negative 1. So I subtract 4, and I subtract 4, and the solution to this one is negative 3, negative 5. Now, when you're solving an absolute value equation, if you don't get two answers, you've missed half the problem. That's the most common error, is you forget to do the other half. All right, the last one we're going to look at is number 101 on the next page, and it's different because it's equal to a negative number. Well, absolute value measures a distance from 0, so it's always positive. So when is absolute value equal to a negative number? Never. So the answer to this one is no solution. As soon as I see absolute value equal to a negative number, it's no solution. Now, that's different from when I have removed the absolute value and it equals a negative number. Don't write no solution for this part because here there is no absolute value. When you split it into two parts, the absolute value sign goes away. And it was equal to a positive number in this case, so there was an answer. But on this one, because before I do anything to it, the absolute value is equal to a negative number, that's why there's no solution. All right, at this point, you should be ready to do the homework for section 8.3. Again, I remind you that if you didn't get it all from my video, watch the video on My Math Lab. This was section 8.3.